The council chamber stretched out like a vast metal canyon. Nari sat in her small booth near the back wall where the shadows gathered thick. Her fingers moved across the translation panel with practiced ease. Words flowed from one alien language to another through her mind and out through the speakers. Nobody looked at her. Nobody ever looked at her. She had been doing this job for 3 years now. 3 years of sitting in the dark corner while beings from across the galaxy made decisions about wars and peace and trade. 3 years of being treated like the furniture, like the air filtration system. Something necessary but not worth noticing. Commander Vexter stood at the center podium. He was a Draxian. His species looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a bear and then covered it in armor plates. He spoke in his harsh clicking language about security concerns in the outer sectors. Nari translated his words into the 17 other languages needed for the council members to understand. She was good at her job. Very good. But nobody cared about that. Ambassador Krell sat 3 seats down from the podium. The Krellian was an insect species that moved in unsettling ways. Multiple eyes tracked different council members at once. Krell never once looked toward Nari's booth. None of them did. The meeting dragged on for 4 hours. Nari's back ached from sitting. Her eyes burned from staring at the translation screen, but she kept working. She caught every word. She noticed every pause, every nervous gesture, every meaningful glance between the council members. That was the thing about being invisible. People forgot you could see them. When the meeting finally ended, the council members filed out in their respective groups. Nari powered down her station and gathered her things. The chamber emptied quickly. Soon she was alone with just the cleaning drones that hummed along the floors. She took the long route back to her quarters. The station was enormous. It housed representatives from 40 different species. Humans occupied one small section on the lower levels. The areas where the gravity was a bit too strong and the lighting a bit too dim for most species to find comfortable. Humans could adapt, though. That was what her species did best. Nari passed through the common area where other humans gathered. Her friend Choi Mina waved from a table near the food dispensers. Mina worked in maintenance. She fixed broken environmental systems and unclogged waste recyclers. Another invisible job done by invisible humans. Long meeting today? Mina asked. Nari nodded and sat down. They talked about expanding the trade routes through the Helios sector. Anything that helps us? No. The routes avoid all human colonies. Again. Mina sighed and pushed a food packet across the table. You look tired. Eat something. The food was bland but nutritious. Standard human rations. Nothing like the fancy meals the council members enjoyed in their dining halls. Nariate anyway. Her body needed fuel. My brother is coming to the station next week, Nari said between bites. His freighter has a delivery contract. Park Daewon? I haven't seen him in months. How is he? Busy. The outer colonies always need supplies. He makes good money running those routes. They talked for a while longer about simple things. Family, friends, the small gossip that made life bearable on the station. Then Mina had to return to work. A broken air filter on level 7 needed her attention. Nari went back to her quarters alone. Her room was tiny, just a bed and a desk and a small bathroom. But it was hers. She had covered one wall with screens that showed news feeds from Earth and the colonies. She liked to stay connected to home even though she was hundreds of light years away. She sat at her desk and pulled up her translation logs from the day. It was a habit she had developed. Recording everything, keeping detailed notes. Nobody asked her to do this. Nobody checked her work this carefully. But Nari had learned long ago that details mattered. As she reviewed the files, something caught her attention. During the security discussion, Commander Vexter had used a phrase that seemed odd. He had mentioned concerns about fast-adapting species in the outer regions. The translation matrix had rendered it simply as a general security concern. But Nari knew the Draxian language better than the matrix did. The actual phrase Vexter used was more specific. It referred to species that learned too quickly, species that might become threats. She replayed the recording. Listened again. Yes, there it was. A subtle warning buried in military jargon, and the way Krell had clicked his mandibles in agreement suggested he understood the implication too. Nari felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. She pulled up older meeting records, started searching for similar phrases, similar patterns. 3 hours later, her desk was covered in notes. She had found 17 instances over the past 6 months where council members had discussed fast-adapting species. They never said humans directly, but the context made it clear. The timing of these discussions matched perfectly with decisions that isolated human trade routes, that limited human access to advanced technology, that kept humanity on the lowest tier of galactic civilization. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Nari sat back in her chair. Her mind raced. This was bigger than just trade disputes or casual prejudice. This was coordinated, planned, but why? Humans were no threat to anyone. Earth had barely 30 colonies. Human ships were old and slow. Human weapons were primitive compared to what the major powers possessed, unless they were afraid of what humans might become. She thought about reaching out to Ambassador Li Haiyanwu. He was the senior human diplomat on the station, but she already knew what would happen. He would tell her she was overreacting, tell her not to make trouble. The human diplomatic corps had a policy of keeping quiet and not causing problems. They believed that eventually the other species would accept humanity as equals. Nari wasn't so sure anymore. She looked at her screens again, studied the patterns in the data. There was something here, something dangerous, but she was just a translator. Just another invisible human that nobody noticed. Maybe that would be enough. She began copying files to a secure storage device. If she was going to investigate this, she needed to be careful. She needed to be smart. Most importantly, she needed to stay invisible just a little while longer. Outside her small window, the station rotated slowly. Stars wheeled past in an endless dance. Somewhere out there was Earth. Home. Family. Billions of humans who had no idea that their very existence might be seen as a problem by the powers that ruled the galaxy. Nari made a decision then. She would find out the truth. She would uncover whatever conspiracy was brewing in those council chambers. And if necessary, she would stop it all by herself if she had to. Because that was what humans did. They adapted. They survived. They found a way, even when nobody was watching. Nari spent the next week living 2 lives. During the day, she sat in her translation booth and did her job. She smiled politely when passing aliens in the corridors. She kept her head down and her mouth shut. The perfect invisible human. But at night, she became someone else. A hunter, a detective. She dove deep into the station's data network searching for truth. The station's computer system was vast and complex. It had been built by dozens of species over decades. Each one had added their own security protocols and access restrictions. But they had all made the same mistake. They assumed a low-level human translator would never try to go anywhere she wasn't supposed to. Nari found gaps in the security, small cracks where different systems didn't quite connect properly. She slipped through these cracks like water finding its way downhill. On the 4th night, she found something interesting. Encrypted military communications between Draxian ships in deep space. The encryption was strong but not perfect. Nari had always been good with patterns. She could see structures in language that others missed. Code was just another kind of language. She worked on breaking the encryption for 3 nights. Her eyes grew red and tired. Her hands cramped from typing. But finally the code cracked open like an egg. The messages made her blood run cold. The Draxian fleet was mobilizing. Ship movements were being coordinated across multiple sectors. Supply lines were being established. Weapon systems were being upgraded. Everything pointed to preparation for a major military operation, and buried in the tactical discussions was a target designation. Sector 7, the human sector. Nari sat back from her screen. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was worse than she had feared. This wasn't just political maneuvering or economic pressure. This was an actual threat to human survival. She needed help. She couldn't do this alone. The next morning, she sent a message to Kim Taeyang. He was another human who worked on the station, a data analyst in the commercial trade department. They had met at a human community gathering months ago. He had seemed smart and trustworthy. They met in a small cafe on the human level. The place served terrible coffee, but it was always empty. Nobody wanted to come down to the human sections if they could avoid it. Taeyang arrived right on time. He was young, maybe 25. He wore the bland uniform of a junior analyst. His eyes were sharp, though, curious. "Thanks for meeting me," Nari said. "Your message said it was important." "It is. I need access to restricted commercial files, trade records, ship manifests, treaties." Taeyang raised his eyebrows. That's way above your clearance level. Above mine too, honestly. I know. But you work in trade. You have legitimate reasons to access those files sometimes. What's this about, Nari? She looked around, made sure nobody was listening. Then she leaned forward and spoke quietly. I think someone is planning to attack human space. Multiple species. Coordinated. I've found military communications that confirm fleet movements. But I need more information. I need to understand the full scope. Taeyang stared at her. That's insane. I know how it sounds. Do you have proof? Nari pulled out a small data chip, slid it across the table. Look at this tonight. In private. Then tell me I'm wrong. He took the chip, slipped it into his pocket. If you're right about this, why haven't you gone to Ambassador Lee? Because he won't believe me. I'm just a translator. Nobody listens to us. Taeyang nodded slowly. He understood. He was invisible too in his own way. I'll look at your data. If it checks out, I'll help you. 3 days later, they met again. This time Taeyang brought files. Lots of files, you were right, he said. His voice was tight with tension. I cross-referenced the military movements with commercial shipping. There's been a systematic reduction in trade with human colonies over the past year. Not random market forces. Deliberate policy. And look at this. He showed her a chart on his tablet. 4 major powers have all purchased war bonds in the last 6 months. Draxians, Krellians, the Aquarian Collective, and the Hive Worlds. That's a massive amount of military spending all happening at once. When nations prepare for war, they need money, Nari said. Exactly. And there's more. I found treaty discussions. Secret ones. These species are forming an alliance. The official reason is mutual defense. But defense against what? There's no major threat in the galaxy right now. Except us, Nari said quietly. They see humanity as the threat, but we're weak. We barely have a navy. Our technology is generations behind theirs. We adapt fast, though. We learn, we change. Maybe that scares them. They spent hours going through the data. The picture became clearer and more terrifying. This wasn't just one species acting alone. This was a conspiracy involving the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. And they all had the same goal. Eliminate humanity before humans became too strong to stop. Nari found the timeline buried in a coded military directive. The attack was planned for the Unity Summit, 6 weeks away. All human leadership would gather on the station for the annual diplomatic conference. Ambassadors, military commanders, colonial governors, everyone important. While they were on the station away from Earth, the fleets would strike. Earth and the 30 colonies would be hit simultaneously. Overwhelming force. No warning, no chance to defend. And on the station, the life support systems and human quarters would fail. A tragic accident during the summit. How unfortunate. How convenient. We have to warn someone, Taeyang said. Earth, the colonies, anyone. I tried, Nari said. I sent a report to Ambassador Lee yesterday. He called me into his office this morning. What did he say? Nari's hands clenched into fists. He told me I was being paranoid, that I was seeing patterns that don't exist. He said humans need to be careful not to appear threatening or aggressive. He said my wild theories could damage diplomatic relations. He didn't believe you. Worse, he ordered me to stop, said if I kept spreading these ideas he would have me sent back to Earth. Dismissed from service. Taeyang cursed under his breath. So what do we do? Nari looked at him. Really looked at him. He was scared. She could see it in his eyes. But he was still here. Still willing to help. We stopped them ourselves, she said. How? We're just 2 people. 2 invisible nobodies. Exactly. That's our advantage. They don't see us coming. She pulled up a file on her tablet. I've been studying the conspiracy, looking for weaknesses. The alliance between these species is fragile. They don't trust each other. The Draxians think they'll be in charge after humanity is gone. The Krellians think the same thing. The Aquarians want access to human colony worlds for resources. Everyone has a different agenda, so we turn them against each other. Yes, we use their own paranoia as a weapon. We make them suspicious of each other. We feed false information into their networks. We create chaos. That's incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than doing nothing? Taeyang thought about it. About Earth, about his family back home, about billions of humans who had no idea death was coming for them. No, he said finally. You're right. Show me what you need. They worked through the night making plans. Nari would use her position in the council to monitor communications and plant disinformation. Taeyang would manipulate commercial data to make it look like one species was preparing to betray the others. It was a desperate plan. A crazy plan, but it was all they had. As dawn approached and the station's artificial lights began to brighten, Nari felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. For so long she had been invisible, powerless, just a voice in the dark, translating other people's words. Now she would use that invisibility as a weapon. She would fight for humanity in the only way she could. From the shadows, unseen, underestimated. She thought about her brother Daewon. He would arrive next week with his freighter. She would need to warn him. Get him to spread word to the colonies quietly. Prepare them without causing panic. The war was coming whether anyone believed it or not. But if Nari had anything to say about it, humanity wouldn't face it blind and helpless. They would fight. And maybe, just maybe, they would survive. Week 2 of Nari's secret war began with a careful strike. She sat in her translation booth during a routine security briefing. Commander Vexther was discussing fleet positions with his Draxian officers. They spoke freely because they never imagined the small human in the corner could understand their military codes, but Nari understood everything. She learned that the Draxian Third Fleet would move through the Kepler corridor next month. This corridor passed close to Krellian territory. It was a suspicious route, one that could be misinterpreted as aggressive positioning. That night, Nari created a false intelligence report. She made it look like it came from a Krellian spy network. The report suggested the Draxians were planning to seize Krellian mining operations in the Outer Rim. She added just enough real information to make it believable. Real ship names, real officer designations, real movement schedules. Then she planted the report where Krellian intelligence would find it. Taeyang helped by adjusting commercial shipping manifests. He made it appear that Draxian merchant vessels were stockpiling weapons near Krellian space. Small changes. A container label here, a customs declaration there. Nothing obvious. Just enough to raise questions. 3 days later, Nari sat in the council chamber and watched the results. Ambassador Krell arrived with extra security guards. His multiple eyes kept tracking Commander Vexther throughout the meeting. The Draxian noticed and his body language became defensive. The first crack in the alliance had appeared. But Nari knew one crack wasn't enough. She needed to widen it. Make it a chasm. Her brother Daewon arrived on schedule. His freighter docked on the lower levels where human ships berthed. Nari met him in the cargo bay. It had been 6 months since she last saw him. He looked tired. Life in space-age people fast, little sister, he said and hugged her tight. You look different. Different how? Harder. Like something changed. They walked to a quiet corner of the bay. Nari told him everything. The conspiracy. The planned attack. The timeline. The fact that nobody in authority would listen to her. Daewon listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. You're sure about this? He finally asked. I'm sure. Then we need to get word to the colonies. Quietly. Let people prepare without starting a panic. That's why I told you. You have contacts. People trust freighter captains. You see things officials don't. Daewon nodded. I know a few people. Military types who retired to the colonies. They'll listen. They'll spread the word. Be careful. If the conspiracy realizes humans are preparing, they might move up their timeline. I'll be careful. What about you? What's your next move? Nari pulled out her tablet. Showed him files and charts. I'm going to make them paranoid. Make them suspect each other. By the time the summit arrives, they'll be too busy watching each other to coordinate an attack. That's a hell of a plan, Nari. It's the only plan I have. They spent another hour together, talking about home, about family, about the small normal things that felt precious now that war was coming. Then Daewon had to leave. His ship had a schedule to keep. Nari watched his freighter detach from the station and boost away into the dark. She felt very alone suddenly. But there was no time for doubt. Only action. The next phase of her plan required help from an unexpected source. Yoon Jiwoo worked in the xenobiology labs on level 12. Nari had met her at a human gathering months ago. Jiwoo studied alien species for the Council's science division. She had access to biological data and medical records that Nari needed. They met in the lab late at night when the other scientists had gone home. Jiwoo was short and intense with quick nervous energy. She looked at Nari with suspicious eyes. Why do you need biological data on council species? Jiwoo asked. I can't tell you everything, but I need to understand how they think, how they communicate. Their psychology. That's not what biological data shows when it shows stress markers, sleep patterns, chemical changes in their bodies when they're anxious or afraid. I need to know if my plan is working. If they're starting to doubt each other, Jiwoo studied her. You're up to something dangerous. Yes. Does it help humanity? I hope so. Jiwoo made a decision. She turned to her terminal and pulled up files. Draxians show stress through scale color changes. Very subtle but measurable. Krellians release pheromones when agitated. Their hive minds become less coordinated under pressure. She showed Nari how to read the biological signs, how to tell when an alien was lying or scared or angry. It was information Nari could use to gauge the effectiveness of her manipulation. Thank you, Nari said. Don't thank me yet. If you get caught, we're both finished. But Nari didn't plan to get caught. Over the next 2 weeks, she executed her strategy with precision. She planted evidence of Aquarian spies and Draxian military networks. She created fake communications between Krellian hive clusters, discussing betrayal of their allies. She manipulated trade data to suggest the hive worlds were preparing to claim human territories for themselves. Each piece of false information was carefully crafted, small enough to seem real, damaging enough to create suspicion. She used her knowledge of each species against them, played on their existing prejudices and fears, and it worked. The council meetings became tense affairs. Species that had been coordinating now watched each other with hostile eyes. Security details doubled. Private meetings increased. Encrypted communications flew back and forth between homeworlds and the station. Taeyang reported that trade between the conspiracy members had slowed. Ships were being recalled. Resources redirected. The careful coordination required for a simultaneous attack was falling apart. But success brought new dangers. Nari noticed she was being followed. A Draxian junior officer named Rex appeared in corridors where she walked, sat in cafes where she ate, always watching, always present. Commander Vexler had become suspicious, not of her specifically, but of everyone. He had started an investigation to find the source of intelligence leaks. His people were checking security logs, interviewing station personnel, getting closer. Nari knew she was running out of time. The summit was 4 weeks away. She needed one more major strike to completely fracture the conspiracy, but she also needed to cover her tracks better. She met with Taeyang in their usual cafe. He looked worried. Someone accessed my terminal yesterday, he said. Checked my file request, my search history. They're investigating. If they trace things back to us, we're dead. Then we need to move faster. Hit them harder. Or we could stop. Go to ground. Hope they don't find us, Nari shook her head. If we stop now, they'll regroup. They'll coordinate again. Humanity dies. If we continue, they'll catch us. We die. Maybe. But at least we go down fighting. Taeyang laughed despite the fear in his eyes. You're crazy. You know that? Probably. That night, Nari executed her most ambitious manipulation yet. She created a complete false flag operation. She made it look like the Krellians had attempted to hack Draxian military command codes. She planted evidence in multiple locations, made the trail obvious enough to find but complex enough to seem real. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, Draxian forces on the station went to high alert. Commander Vexler demanded an emergency council session. He accused the Krellians of treachery. Ambassador Krell responded with outrage and counter-accusations. The meeting devolved into shouting, threats. The careful alliance was crumbling in real time. Nari watched from her translation booth and felt a grim satisfaction. But she also felt the net closing around her. Rex stood at the back of the chamber staring directly at her booth. He knew. Maybe he didn't have proof yet, but he knew someone was manipulating events. After the meeting ended, Nari left quickly. She took a different route back to her quarters, checked behind her constantly. Her heart hammered in her chest. She made it to the human level safely, but as she approached her door, she saw them. 2 Draxian security officers waiting in the corridor. Rex stepped out from a side passage. His scales showed the dark patterns of aggression. Han Nari, you will come with us. On what charge? Suspicion of espionage and sabotage. Commander Vexter wants to ask you questions. Nari's mind raced. She could run. But where? The station was their territory. She could fight. But 2 armed Draxians would kill her easily. She could call for help. But who would come? She thought about the data chip hidden in her quarters. All her evidence, all her work. If they found it, everything would be revealed. But also everything would be lost. I want to contact my ambassador, she said. Later, after questioning. Come now. They took her arms. Not gently. Nari didn't resist. As they led her away, she saw Choi Mina watching from a doorway. Their eyes met. Nari gave the smallest shake of her head. Don't try to help. Don't get involved. The Draxians took her to the security level, put her in a small cell with no windows. The door sealed with a heavy magnetic lock. Nari sat on the hard bench and tried to stay calm. She had known this might happen, had prepared for it. She had contingency plans. Taeyang knew what to do if she disappeared. The information would still get out. But sitting alone in the cell, she felt the weight of her choices. She was just one person, one invisible translator, and she had declared war on the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Now she would pay the price. The cell was cold. Nari wrapped her arms around herself and waited. Hours passed. Nobody came. That was a tactic she recognized. Let the prisoner sit alone. Let fear do the work. But Nari had faced worse than fear. She had faced the knowledge that her entire species might be wiped out. A cold cell was nothing compared to that. Finally, the door opened. Commander Vexter entered with Rex behind him. The Draxian commander was massive in the small space. His scales showed patterns of anger and satisfaction. Translator Han Nari, he said in perfect human English. Do you know why you are here? You haven't told me yet. We have been experiencing security breaches, intelligence leaks. Someone has been manipulating data across multiple networks, creating false reports, sowing discord among the council species. That sounds serious? It is. And our investigation has traced activity back to terminals you have accessed. Nari kept her face neutral. I access translation databases. That's my job. Your access logs show entry into restricted military and commercial files a translator has no business viewing. Then your logs are wrong. Vexter moved closer. His breath smelled like hot metal. You will tell me what you have done. You will tell me who helped you. You will tell me everything. I want to speak with Ambassador Lee. Your ambassador has no authority in matters of station security. You are suspected of crimes against the Galactic Council. You will answer to us. Nari met his eyes, saw the certainty there. He believed he had won, that he had caught the saboteur, that soon he would have confessions and evidence and this annoyance would be finished. He had no idea what was coming. I have nothing to say without legal representation, Nari said. Vexter's scales darkened with frustration. You think human laws protect you here? You think anyone cares about one translator? You are nothing. You have always been nothing. He left, slammed the door behind him. Nari smiled in the darkness. Let him think she was helpless. Let him waste time trying to break her. Every hour she stayed in this cell was another hour for her backup plans to activate. Because Nari had learned something important in 3 years of being invisible. She had learned patience. And she had learned that the most dangerous enemy was the one you didn't see coming. Outside the cell, events were moving fast. Taeyang had noticed when Nari didn't show up for their scheduled meeting. He had activated the contingency protocol they had discussed. He sent coded messages to 3 different people. Yoon Ji-woo, Bae Sung-ho, who ran supplies between human ships, and a carefully worded data packet to an anonymous address. The anonymous address belonged to Overseer Thrain of the Centauran Consensus. Nari had discovered him weeks ago. He was one of the few council members who seemed genuinely concerned about stability rather than power. She had been leaving small breadcrumbs of information where he would find them, not enough to reveal herself, just enough to make him ask questions. Now Taeyang sent him everything, all of Nari's evidence, all the proof of the conspiracy, all the data showing how the major powers planned to eliminate humanity. Thrain received the packet in his private quarters. He was a tall, thin being with gray skin and large dark eyes. His species valued logic and order above all else. He opened the files and began to read. 3 hours later, he was still reading. His assistant brought him food. He ignored it. The evidence was damning, detailed, impossible to dismiss. If this was true, the galaxy was about to descend into chaos. The attack on humanity would trigger responses from neutral species. Trade would collapse. The careful balance of power that had maintained peace for decades would shatter. Thrain made a decision. He couldn't stop the conspiracy alone, but he could slow it down. By time, he began sending his own messages to allies, to neutral parties, to species that had no interest in galactic war. Back in her cell, Nari had no way of knowing if her plans were working. She could only wait and hope. On the second day, they brought her food. Standard rations. She ate slowly, preserved her strength. On the third day, Vexther returned. This time he wasn't alone. Ambassador Krell came with him. The Krellian's multiple eyes studied Nari with cold insect intelligence. "We have analyzed your access patterns," Krell clicked. "We have found evidence of your interference in council affairs." "What evidence?" Vexther threw a tablet onto the bench beside her. "Your fingerprints on terminals, your biometric signatures in secure areas, your search queries in restricted databases." Nari looked at the tablet. The evidence did look bad, but she noticed something. They were showing her physical evidence, terminal access, location data. They hadn't mentioned the actual content of what she had done, the false reports she had created, the intelligence she had manipulated. They didn't have that. They knew someone had been in the systems, but they didn't know exactly what had been changed. The networks were too complex, the alterations too subtle. "I accessed terminals in public areas," Nari said. "I ran searches related to translation work." "That's not a crime." "You will confess," Vexther growled. "I have nothing to confess." Krell leaned forward. "You do not understand your position, human. We can hold you indefinitely. No trial, no representation. You will simply disappear, another unfortunate casualty of life on the station." Nari felt ice in her stomach. They were threatening to kill her quietly, make it look like an accident. Nobody would question it. Nobody would care about one dead translator, but she couldn't show fear. Couldn't give them satisfaction. "Do what you want," she said. "It won't change anything." "What does that mean?" Vexther demanded. "It means you're already too late." His scales flared dark red with rage. He grabbed Nari by the throat and lifted her off the bench. His strength was immense. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. "Tell me what you have done," he roared. Black spots appeared in Nari's vision. Her lungs burned, but she managed to smile. Because even if she died here, the truth was already spreading. The evidence was already in the right hands. She had won even if she didn't survive to see it. Krell pulled Vexther back. "Control yourself, Commander. A dead prisoner tells us nothing." Vexther dropped Nari. She collapsed on the bench, gasping for air. Her throat felt crushed, but she was alive. For now, they left her alone again. Nari lay on the bench and tried to breathe. Her whole body hurt, but her mind was still working, still planning. She thought about her brother somewhere in space, about Taiyang and Jiwoo and all the other humans who were counting on her, about Earth and the colonies and billions of people who just wanted to live their lives in peace. She had done everything she could. Now it was up to others to finish what she started. Days passed. The cell door opened occasionally. Food came, waste was removed, but nobody questioned her again. That worried Nari more than the interrogations had. Silence meant they were planning something. On the seventh day, the door opened and someone unexpected entered. Ambassador Lee Hyanwoo, the human diplomat who had dismissed her warnings, who had ordered her to stop investigating. He looked uncomfortable, guilty. "Nari," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" "For not believing me. For doing nothing while they planned to kill us all. I thought you were wrong. I thought you were causing problems over nothing. And now?" Lee sat down on the bench beside her. "Now evidence has started circulating through the council. Anonymous sources, data packets, everything you tried to tell me. It's real. It's all real. I know. Why didn't you come to me again? Insist that I listen?" "Would you have listened?" Lee was silent. They both knew the answer. "The council is in chaos," Lee said. "The conspiracy is falling apart. Species are accusing each other. Trust is gone. The summit has been postponed. But Nari, you're in serious danger. Vexther wants you dead. He knows you're responsible even if he can't prove it. Can you get me out?" "I'm trying. But my authority here is limited. The Draxians control security. They're claiming jurisdiction over you because the alleged crimes happened on the station. So I'm trapped. For now. But help is coming. Earth has been alerted. We have ships on the way. Admiral Quan Jihu is bringing a battle group. They'll be here in 3 days. 3 days. Nari wasn't sure she had 3 days. Vexter was running out of patience. He might decide it was easier to kill her and deal with the diplomatic consequences later. Lee stood to leave. Hold on, Nari. Just hold on a little longer. You saved us, all of us. We won't abandon you. After he left, Nari sat in the darkness and tried to believe him. Tried to have hope. But hope was a fragile thing when you were alone in a cell waiting for death. She closed her eyes and thought about home. About Earth. About the sun rising over the mountains where she grew up. About her mother's garden. About ordinary, peaceful things. If she died here, at least it would be for something that mattered. At least humanity would survive. That had to be enough. The explosion happened on the second morning of day 8. Nari felt it through the walls of her cell. A deep rumbling vibration that made the metal floor shake. Alarms began screaming throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridor outside. The door to her cell remained locked. Nari stood and pressed her ear against it. She could hear running footsteps, shouting in multiple languages. Something had gone very wrong. Hours passed. The alarms continued. Nobody came to check on her. Nari paced the small cell and tried to understand what was happening. Was it the human fleet arriving early? Was it an attack? Had the conspiracy made their move despite the fractures in their alliance? Finally, the door opened, but it wasn't Vexter or his guards. It was Go Yunbi, a human security officer who worked on the lower levels. She had a weapon in her hand and determination on her face. "We need to move now," Yunbi said. "Can you walk?" "What's happening?" "War, come on." Nari followed Yunbi into the corridor. Bodies lay on the floor. Draxian guards. They had been shot with energy weapons. Yunbi moved fast, checking corners, keeping her weapon ready. The Draxians tried to purge the human sections. Yunbi explained as they ran. Life support shut down. Sealing bulkheads. They were going to kill us all. But we got warning. We fought back. Who warned you? Your friend Taeyang. He hacked the security systems. Saw the orders being transmitted. Gave us 10 minutes warning. That was enough. They reached a transit lift. Umbi called it and they waited in tense silence. Nari could hear weapons fire in the distance. The station was turning into a battlefield. The lift arrived. They went up toward the main council level. "Why are we going there?" Nari asked. "Because that's where the truth needs to be told. The council is an emergency session, being broadcast across the entire galaxy. If we can get you there, if you can speak, maybe we can stop this before everyone dies." The lift doors opened onto chaos. The Grand Council chamber was filled with beings from a dozen species. Some were trying to restore order. Others were shouting accusations. Security forces from different civilizations faced each other with weapons drawn. Overseer Thrain stood at the central podium, trying to be heard over the noise. "We must have calm. We must discuss this rationally." But rationality had left the building. Commander Vexter was screaming at Ambassador Krell. The Krellian was clicking rapid-fire responses. Other council members were taking sides, choosing teams, preparing for war. Yunbi pushed through the crowd with Nari behind her. They made it halfway to the podium before Draxian guards spotted them. "The prisoner!" "Stop them!" The guards raised weapons. Yunbi stepped in front of Nari and fired first. Energy bolts crossed the chamber. People scattered. More guards from other species joined the fight. The council chamber became a war zone. Nari saw Ambassador Lee across the room. He was trying to reach her but couldn't get through the fighting. She saw Taeyang near a terminal station, frantically working on something. She saw Yun Jiwoo pulling injured people to safety, and she saw Commander Vexter turning toward her with murder in his eyes. He charged through the crowd, beings scattered from his path. He was massive and angry and unstoppable. Hyunbi fired at him, but her shots bounced off his armor plating. He swatted her aside like she weighed nothing. Then he had Nari by the throat again, lifted her into the air. His scales were black with rage. "You did this," he roared. "You destroyed everything." Nari couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, but she could see. She saw the broadcast cameras still recording, saw the transmission lights still active, saw that every word, every action was being sent across the galaxy to billions of watching eyes. Thrain's voice cut through the chaos. "Commander Vexter, release her. This is being broadcast." "I don't care," Vexter screamed. "Let them all see what happens to humans who interfere with their betters." Nari's vision was going dark. This was it. She was going to die here. But at least everyone would see. At least the truth would be known. Then something unexpected happened. Vexter started talking. Not to Nari, to the cameras, to the galaxy watching. This human. This worthless translator, Han Nari! She has destroyed cycles of careful planning. She infiltrated our networks. She manipulated our intelligence. She turned us against each other. One insignificant human female brought down the greatest alliance in galactic history. He shook Nari like a rag doll. But he kept talking, kept confessing. The rage had broken something in him. He couldn't stop himself. We were going to eliminate the human threat, remove them before they became too powerful. It was the logical choice, the necessary choice. But she stopped us. Hanari, this nothing, this invisible creature we never should have noticed. The chamber had gone silent. Everyone was listening. Everyone was watching. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, billions of beings heard Commander Vexter confess to the conspiracy, heard him speak the name of the human who had defeated it, Hanari. He said it again and again. Like a curse, like a prayer, like he couldn't believe it himself. Admiral Quan Jihu's voice suddenly boomed through the station speakers. This is the Earth Defense Fleet. We are in position around the station. Commander Vexter, release the human immediately or we will open fire. Vexter looked up at the speakers. Reality seemed to crash back into him. He realized what he had done. What he had said. He dropped Nari and stepped back. Human Marines poured into the chamber. They had come through access tunnels, through maintenance shafts, through every hidden route in the station. They surrounded Vexter and the other conspirators. Ambassador Lee rushed to Nari's side, helped her sit up. Her throat was crushed. She couldn't speak. But she could see the main display screen showing the broadcast feed. The image showed her. Hanari, small, bruised, nearly dead. And below the image scrolled text in 100 languages. Her name, over and over. The human who had stopped a genocide. The translator who had saved her species. Taeyang appeared beside her with a medical kit. Started treating her throat. You did it, he whispered. The whole galaxy knows now. They can't hide it, can't deny it. You won. Nari managed a small nod. It hurt to move, hurt to breathe, but she was alive. Humanity was alive. Overseer Thrain approached slowly. He looked tired. Miss Hanari, I owe you an apology. My people knew something was wrong, but we did not act fast enough. You had to do it alone. Nari tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper. Not alone. Had help. Yes, but you started it. You saw what others missed. You acted when others would not. He turned to address the chamber and the cameras. Let it be recorded. The Centauran consensus formally recognizes Hanari of Earth as protector of peace. Let all species know this name. Let all species remember what she did. Other council members began to speak. Not all of them. The conspirators remained silent. But enough voices rose to matter. Aquarian representatives, Hive World diplomats, smaller species who had feared the major powers, they spoke her name, Hanari. They acknowledged what she had done. They called for justice, for investigation, for the conspirators to face trial. The tide had turned, not because of military force, not because of political pressure, but because one invisible woman had become visible, because her enemy had spoken her name with such fury that the whole galaxy heard it. Ambassador Krell was arrested. Vexter was placed in custody. Other conspirators were identified and detained. The alliance was finished. The threat was ended, but the cost had been high. Fighting on the station had killed dozens. Human sections were damaged. Trust between species was shattered. The galaxy would need time to heal. Nari was carried to the medical bay on a stretcher. Human doctors worked on her throat, said she would recover, said she was lucky to be alive. She didn't feel lucky. She felt exhausted, felt like she had aged years in the past weeks. But she also felt something else, pride, not for herself, for humanity, for what they had proven, that even the smallest voice could change everything. That being overlooked could become an advantage. That underestimation was a weapon that could be turned against those who wielded it. As the medical drugs pulled her toward sleep, Nari heard the doctors talking. They were watching news feeds, seeing reactions from across the galaxy. On Earth, people were celebrating in the streets. The colonies were safe. War had been averted, and everyone knew the name of the translator who had saved them. Hanari, the invisible woman who had become the most visible human in the galaxy. the one who had been overlooked and underestimated until her enemy spoke her name, and in speaking it changed everything. 2 months had passed since the day the galaxy learned her name. Nari stood at the window of her new quarters and looked out at the rebuilt station. Construction drones moved between damaged sections. Repair crews from a dozen species worked side by side. The station was healing, slowly, but healing. Her throat had healed too. The doctors said she was lucky. A few more seconds in Vexter's grip and her windpipe would have been crushed beyond repair. Now she could speak normally again, though her voice carried a slight rasp that would probably never go away. A permanent reminder of what she had survived. The door chimed. Nari turned from the window. "Come in." Taiyang entered, carrying a data pad and 2 cups of coffee. Real coffee from Earth, not the synthetic stuff the station usually served. He handed her a cup and smiled. "Thought you might need this," he said. "Big day today. Don't remind me." Today was the memorial ceremony, a formal remembrance for all those who had died during the brief but brutal fighting on the station. 37 humans, 41 Draxians, 23 from other species, all dead because of a conspiracy built on fear and hate. Nari was supposed to give a speech. She had written and rewritten it a dozen times. Nothing felt right. How do you honor the dead while also speaking about hope for the future? "You'll do fine," Taiyang said, reading her expression. "Just speak from the heart. My heart is tired, Taiyang, I know." "Mine too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Taiyang had been promoted. He now headed the Human Intelligence Division for the station. A real position with real authority, not just invisible work that nobody acknowledged. "How are the trials going?" Nari asked slowly. "The Galactic Court is being very careful. They want to make sure everything is legal and proper. Vexter will probably spend the rest of his life in prison, Krell too. The others are cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences. And the species that were part of the conspiracy? Trying to rebuild their reputations. The Draxian government has a new leadership council. They're making all kinds of apologies and promises. The Krellians are restructuring their hive priorities. Everyone wants to show they've changed." Nari sipped her coffee. It was good. Strong and bitter. Real. "Do you think they really have changed?" she asked. Taeyang considered the question. "Some have. Some are just scared. But fear can be a teacher too. They're afraid of what happens if they underestimate humanity again." There was a knock at the door. This time it was her brother Daewon. He looked good. Healthy. His freighter was docked at the station for the ceremony. He had brought supplies and messages from the colonies. "Little sister," he said and hugged her carefully. He was always careful now, afraid he might hurt her damaged throat. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked together through the station. Nari noticed the changes everywhere. Human sections were no longer isolated on the lower levels. New quarters had been built throughout the station. Mixed residential areas where humans lived beside Aquarians and Centaurans and even a few reformed Draxians. And people nodded to her as she passed. Not just humans. Aliens too. They spoke her name, offered respect. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed perhaps by how they had treated humans before. But they acknowledged her presence. She was no longer invisible. The memorial hall was packed. Every seat filled. Representatives from 40 species. Military officers, diplomats, scientists, ordinary workers, all gathered to remember the dead and witness the dawn of a new era. Nari saw familiar faces. Yunjiwoo sitting with other scientists, Go Yunbi in her security uniform, Choi Mina who had been promoted to chief of station maintenance, Ambassador Lee who had finally learned to listen, and in the front row sat Overseer Thrain, the Centauran who had helped when it mattered most. He nodded to Nari with those large dark eyes. A gesture of respect between allies. The ceremony began with a moment of silence. Then various speakers took the podium. They talked about sacrifice, about the cost of peace, about lessons learned. Some speeches were good, others were political posturing. Nari listened to them all and tried to find the right words for her own speech. Finally, it was her turn. She walked to the podium on legs that felt shaky, looked out at the crowd, saw all those eyes watching her, waiting. She thought about running, about going back to her quarters and hiding, about being invisible again. But those days were over. "For better or worse, my name is Nari," she began. Her voice carried through the hall. strong despite the rasp. 2 months ago, most of you didn't know that name. Didn't know I existed. I was just a translator. Just another human doing invisible work in the background. She paused, gathered her thoughts. I want to tell you why that mattered. Why being invisible was both humanity's weakness and our strength. For 30 years, humans have been part of the galactic community. And for 30 years, we were treated like we didn't matter. Like our voices weren't worth hearing. Our ideas weren't worth considering. Our lives weren't worth protecting. Some aliens in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Good. They should be uncomfortable. But being overlooked taught us something important. It taught us to watch, to listen, to learn. While you dismissed us, we studied you. We learned your languages, your customs, your weaknesses. We became experts on every species in the galaxy because we had to. Because survival meant understanding. Nari looked directly at the section where Draxian representatives sat. They met her gaze. Some with shame, some with grudging respect. Commander Vexter made a mistake. He and his allies assumed that because humans seemed weak, we were weak. Because we didn't fight back, we couldn't fight back. Because we accepted our place on the bottom, we would always stay there. They forgot something crucial. Humans adapt, we change, we overcome. She let that sink in for a moment. The conspiracy failed not because of human military might. We had no fleets, no super weapons, no powerful allies. It failed because one translator refused to accept that her life and the lives of her people didn't matter. And it failed because when pushed, when threatened with extinction, humans pushed back harder than anyone expected. Nari held up a data pad. I have here a list. Every person who helped me. Every human who took a risk when I asked. Taiyang who hacked systems. Jiwoo who provided data. Junbi who fought. Daewon who carried warnings. Sungho who moved supplies. Mina who kept our systems running. Lee who finally chose to believe. And dozens more whose names deserve to be remembered alongside those who died. She read the names. All of them. It took several minutes. The hall was silent except for her voice. These people are heroes, Nari continued when the list was complete. But they're also ordinary humans doing what humans do. Adapting, surviving, protecting each other. That's our real strength. Not weapons. Not technology. Each other. She looked around the hall again, saw humans sitting straighter, saw pride on their faces, saw aliens watching with new understanding. I've been offered a position as Earth's chief ambassador to the Council. I've been offered medals and titles and honors. I appreciate all of it, but I'm going back to translation work, because that's where I can do the most good. Languages are bridges. Understanding is the foundation of peace, and I want to help build that peace. Nari felt tears starting but held them back. Not yet. Almost done. To the families of those who died, both human and alien, I offer my deepest sorrow. They died because of fear and misunderstanding. Let's honor them by choosing differently, by seeing each other, by listening to voices we might have ignored before, by remembering that every being, no matter how small or overlooked, has value. She stepped away from the podium then. The applause started slowly, then built. People stood, first the humans, then others. Soon the entire hall was on its feet. The sound was deafening. Nari walked back to her seat feeling drained. Daewon squeezed her shoulder. Taeyang gave her a thumbs up, but she barely noticed. She was thinking about what came next. The ceremony continued for another hour. More speeches, more remembrances. Finally it ended and people began to disperse. Nari was immediately surrounded by beings wanting to speak with her, wanting to shake her hand, wanting to take pictures, wanting to say they had met the famous Han Nari. It was overwhelming. She smiled and nodded and tried to be gracious. But inside she felt exhausted. This was the price of visibility, of being known. She missed her quiet corner, her anonymous existence, but she also understood something now. Being invisible hadn't kept humans safe. It had made them vulnerable. Only by being seen, by being known, by having names that mattered, could they truly be part of the galactic community. Later that evening, Nari returned to her quarters alone. She stood at the window again and watched the stars. Earth was out there somewhere, home. She wondered if she would ever go back, or if this station would be her home now. Her terminal chimed. A message. She opened it and smiled. It was from a young human named Ansora. She had just been hired as a junior translator. She was asking Nari for advice on how to succeed in the role. Nari thought about it, then began to type. Dear Sora, Congratulations on your new position. Here is my advice. Learn everything you can. Watch carefully. Listen closely. Remember that translation isn't just about words. It's about understanding. And never forget that your voice matters. That you matter. The galaxy may try to overlook you. Don't let them. Be visible.